This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Adobe Acrobat Studio, your new foundation. Use PDF spaces to generate a presentation. Grab your docs, your permits, your moves. AI levels up your pitch, gets it in a groove. Choose a template with your timeless cool. Come on now, let's flex those tools. Draft, design, deliver, make it sing. AI builds the deck so you can build that thing. Do that, do that, do that with Acrobat.
Learn more at adobe.com/do-that-with-acrobat.
I led with my heart, and I put the rejections aside, and I started branding myself as, okay, cannot seek these current opportunities and doing else, creating my own opportunities, creating my own projects, creating my own businesses, my own ideas. And what kept me going was the fact that it resonated.
Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. I'm Lori Adams Brown, and this is a podcast for those who are different and want to make a difference. Some people wait for permission. Others build a future with whatever tools they can get their hands on, even if it's borrowing the only laptop in a house during a global pandemic here in Silicon Valley. Today's guest is the definition of resilience, ambition, and strategic courage. Rebeca Lopez Valerio is a first-generation immigrant who enrolled in college at the age of 15, completed upper division engineering coursework by 17, and launched and scaled a family janitorial business while still a teenager, and went on to earn her bachelor's in electrical engineering, all while navigating the uncertainty of immigration status, financial pressure, and responsibility far beyond her years. She's not just an engineer. She's an entrepreneur, a board leader, a mentor to first-generation students, and now a founder working at the intersection of sustainability, fashion, and AI. This is a conversation today about agency, identity, and what's possible when talent meets grit, especially for those who were never handed a roadmap. Excited to have my friend Rebeca Lopez Valerio on today's show, and for you to get to know her a little bit better and her inspiring journey to bring her to where she is as the leader she is today. Let's get into it. Hi, Rebeca. It's great to have you today here on the show. I'm looking forward to getting to know you a little bit better. We've met through Women XAI community, which is our mutual friend, Jenny K. Pollock. Hi, Jenny. Thanks for bringing Rebeca into my world and my life. I'm really excited about having this conversation with you today, and for the A World of Difference podcast, Difference Makers listeners, to get to know you a little bit better. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Well, let's have a conversation today around all kinds of things about your incredible background, the story that formed who you are as a person, and the kind of leader you are today. When it comes to leadership, especially those of us who have multiple cultures in our backgrounds, we bring a different kind of global mindset to leadership that is truly needed in our world today. And so I would first off just want to say I have loved getting to know you, and I'm really intrigued about who you are as a person and your background. And I want to know, and I think our audience is going to want to know, what are the cultures that have formed you as a person and as a leader? Would you share some of those with us before we kind of get into it?
Yeah, awesome. So I was actually born in Mexico. I would like to say I trace back not too far in my lineage to Indigenous blood, because my parents and I were born off of the state of Oaxaca in Mexico. So technically Puebla, but as we say in Spanish, it was a pueblito. So it's very indigenous, to the point where my dad actually grew up still speaking his dialect. And if you know something about, the Mexican heritage, dialects aren't really spoken or preserved So the fact that he and his parents actually still spoke their dialect showed how removed they were from civilization even. So definitely Mexican, but Indigenous, I would say as well.
It's incredible. It's an incredible heritage. And in my travels in Mexico, even last November being in San Miguel de Allende, I met several Indigenous women who also spoke their local languages. And it just makes me really happy when those get preserved because all the beautiful cultures of the world, um, have so much to teach us. So do you, perhaps speak any, has your dad had a chance to teach you any of that, or have you only grown up speaking Spanish?
Yeah, so I grew up speaking Spanish. And as you probably know and are probably like aware as the listeners, right? Dialects are wonderful for us in terms of like looking back in history and preserving it, but for actual, people still trying to go into the cities, right? Dialects are actually looked down. No, my dad was very actively trying to forget his dialect as I was growing up, and so unfortunately that didn't get passed down. Spanish is what I still speak with my parents till this day, and I hope to continue. But yeah, as for the dialects, I don't even know what dialect he spoke, and I'm very curious if I could ever find that out.
Yeah, it's such an important thing to bring up that because of various factors geopolitically, people have been either taught to feel ashamed of the languages they spoke growing up or the cultures that they bring. And I certainly hear a lot here in California, both from immigrant families as well as from families who've lived here for many generations back when this used to be Mexico as well and colonized by Spain and all the things. But that, even for some kids speaking Spanish, several generations ago, their grandmothers would tell them, don't do that. And we still see a bit of that even here in the Bay Area from some generations that have done that. And no judgment, people make hard decisions, impossible decisions when systems are not made for them. And so, I certainly have experienced that myself and have had many friends, both from my growing up in Venezuela and hard decisions that are being made now and have been made over the last 27 years, as well as certainly for Indigenous populations. And so, yeah, I'd be really curious, kind of what dialect he speaks and what beautiful heritage you have in your background that can teach us more. So really excited, for you and how it's formed you as a person, both your DNA and your ancestry and the incredible people that have helped formed you and the cultures that have formed you. But you have a story of immigration in your family, which is a really important story. And it can be somewhat adjacent to an expat story, but altogether very different in a lot of ways. And so you're first generation. So tell us a little bit about what that has meant for you in terms of you finding your way here and also celebrating, the family and the heritage that you've brought with you.
Yeah. So I definitely resemble with first generation immigration stories. So I myself came to the States when I was around 4 years old. So English was technically my second language, but I was fortunate enough to have come at a very young age, picking up and adapting to language and culture and education. Right. I got right, at a good spot. And so I know that it's difficult for assimilation depending on ages of immigration, right? Because I have an older
Yeah.
brother who is right now 32. And so he was probably at the tail end of eighth grade when we immigrated together. And so for him, it was a challenge seeking higher
That's a hard
education
year.
because
Yeah.
of that. Whereas for myself, I was lucky enough, I went through the traditional K through 12 system that I praise the US for. And I was fortunate enough to pursue higher education, get my bachelor's in electrical engineer. It's honestly a different point where we all start. So I definitely give a lot of praise and credit for the system taking young students like me and assimilating us in a very thorough way.
I'm thrilled to hear that's your experience. I know that many expats or immigrants who've had that story who are listening understand that there are certain ages for children which make it harder just because of human development. 8th grade is a particularly hard time. Really, anything after 12 has a whole different way. Even how you learn language sort of changes in a brain development and things like that. But social relationships shift certainly from like 12, 13 onward. And then, especially if you're getting into high school, all of it matters in terms of we're comparing apples and oranges a lot of times to kids who have moved abroad with their families, either as immigrants or as expats. And that certainly sounds like it's reflected in your story. And I'm really grateful that you've had a good experience in the education system here. Being a Latina in STEM is a really significant thing. And we're always excited to hear your perspectives that we absolutely need in this field. But you kind of mentioned you've been on both sides. Once you were this middle school student having, access programs, and then later as a sponsor and a board leader even. What are the most overlooked resources first-generation students should know about, and how can institutions and companies do a better job connecting students to those earlier?
Yeah. So I would say first generation students down to the essentials do need mentoring, but I think a sense of community is the best way to approach this mentoring because even students are handling a work-life balance of school, academics, personal life. And what I've seen is that these industry mentorship programs are a lot of times already in the systems with corporate partners, right? However, I don't think it's necessarily fostering the support that these students need because I've been a mentor on the industry side as well, and sometimes the students don't even have those, 30 minutes within like a 9 to 5 hour that the mentor is trying to squeeze in, right? But
Mm-hmm.
again, for me as a first generation down to the essentials, I didn't even know what resources were available for me in college. I didn't know financial aid was a thing, right? So it wasn't until I just went out and started speaking to other students who I thought were in a similar situation, or maybe they just had a sibling who went to college. Like, that's how far removed I was from any of the academic system and mentorship, right? So I think students are doing a great job right now helping each other. And I was just having this conversation with another nonprofit partner of mine. And she was laughing at the fact that we as students were helping each other get a job when we ourselves didn't have a job yet or a career. Yet we were helping each other on resumes, we were helping each other with interview prep questions, right? And none of us were experienced or in careers already, right? But it's that sense of support of not like forcing these relationships, but rather fostering a sense of community. And I definitely feel like industry partners can help more in the term of having these communities already built, right? Have resources to tap in, whether it be funding, whether it be not a one-to-one mentorship, but them having an availability of speaking with the group as a whole and understanding where the group stands as a whole. Because again, we feed off each other as first generation students. I cannot stress that enough. As first generation students, we make our own like documents and try to outline everything, whether it be how to apply to financial aid, whether it be these different resources. We list out all the clubs that you can join. We can't stress enough, you have to talk to this person who's also a fellow student who happened to, find a way around this challenge in academia. So again, it's already that community that's built that just needs that support from our industry partners.
That is so. On the one hand, I'm thrilled to hear how supportive this first generation community is with each other. I think it's remarkable. I think there's so much we can learn just from the leadership that you all are bringing to the table, which is so human centered and collective and one of the rising tide raises all boats kind of metaphor is what comes to mind. And so that's incredibly impactful to hear that story. And so I want to hold that truth and then add another truth that I'm also holding when I listen to you, which is that it shouldn't have to be, in my perspective, that the first generation students that have had to work so hard just to be those first generation students are also having to do this workload that it really shouldn't have to be theirs to do. Like that system shouldn't have to rely on the free labor of these students to do that. I'm holding the truth that I'm so grateful you are and that you're supporting each other. And also, I guess, bringing a challenge to that community to say, can we fix this? Can this be more of an organizational effectiveness situation where that isn't so gate kept, that the information is more readily available, that you don't have to know some secret sauce and some insider to get access to what exists? And that it shouldn't be hidden and only accessible to those who somehow you can rely on the good graces of the community. Those are the two truths I'm holding as I hear that.
Yeah.
So, but you do some work in like personal branding. We want to talk about that with you for a little bit because I think that's so important. Not only your personal story, but how you're showing up. There's a lot of narratives out there in our culture that can be some helpful, some very unhelpful. And so as you're tapping in and you described practicing personal branding, long before you ever had the language for it. So how did you learn to really lead with ambition and capability without oversharing hardship, which can be very tricky, also for me? And what advice do you give young professionals who feel defined by their constraints rather than their potential?
I love how you phrase this. What led me to it? I would say it was repeatedly hearing no's to a lot of opportunities. Um, so again, right? I came as an undocumented student to the United States, and a lot of opportunities down to trying to apply for an internship were something that I was not able to do, even if I was offered these internships, which I was offered many times. And so I kept hearing no after no for a lot of opportunities. I knew that eventually, right, I would come up with a solution, or I would have some system to help me. Like now I have a fixed immigration status. But at the time I was repeatedly um getting annoyed, upset, heartbroken with the no's. And so I cried it out, as we all should. But I think after so many times, I understood that there really was no point in crying because of the fact that it was just more exhausting and using up more energy than could be helpful. And so then I started trying to tap into that, if you will, rejection, and understanding that, well, if opportunities won't be open for me, then I'll just have to find a way to open them for myself. So I would still try to find opportunities, but no longer, if you will, in the mainstream forms of internships, but rather building businesses myself, rather building projects outside of work. And at the time, I didn't realize, but now having understood, I was building my personal brand. I was building this personal brand of leaning into this rejection as a form of fuel rather than a form of a challenge that, for many of us, and understandably, can put us down. So, yeah, I definitely think that I'm a person, and I would say I think Latinas would resemble, right, with, as we say in Spanish, coraje, and that could translate to courage, or that can translate to like your own like inner strength, right? So that's where my personal brand started developing, and that's where I knew that that's what I wanted to define me.
Love it. And I think many people listening, whether they've had not your exact same experience, but they've had something adjacent in their lives. And I also love the word coraje, this whole idea of courage. It's very heart driven. And often being courageous means that our heart is going to get involved because there's often fear, and we're doing something courageous even with fear. We're finding our own inner strength, maybe relying on that incredible DNA from your ancestors that you carry in your blood and your bones, that make you
Yes.
who you are as a person, and your own family's personal story. And I think one of the things about being raised in Venezuela, and people will often say about Venezuelans, is they're very resilient as a people. And yet resilience also can bring its own level of exhaustion because your heart is getting involved. And so people who've had to build resilience for either going through incredible hardships as a collective or even individually, and especially even both, can often on the outside look a certain way that might be confusing to people. I think one of the examples of that is Venezuelans celebrating around the world when Maduro was captured on early morning of January 3rd in Caracas. People were confused by that because they thought, aren't they worried about what's next, or aren't they fearful? And the reality is, yeah, but also taking the moment to celebrate, to dance, to be excited that this person who's done so many human rights abuses and crimes against humanity was finally, at least he was stopped. It didn't mean there wasn't a snake around the corner or another Hydra head. But I think sometimes that people can be confused that resilience building only looks like this very outwardly warrior type courage. But what you're also showing us is there's this inner strength, there's this heart involved in it. How does that resonate with you and your journey?
Yeah, I would say I love the resilience that you mentioned, right? I think culturally, and I may be speaking a little biased here, but I feel that immigrants are tasked with having to build their resilience, coming into a foreign country and having a lot of challenges. So I would say that I I think I've learned, and again with this personal branding, and as you mentioned, having heart can be a little off-putting to certain people, and even
Yeah.
in career, sometimes they say, um, professionalism doesn't involve emotions.
Mm,
I think because I built my personal brand around the fact that I was going to, lead from these moments that were probably like rock bottom moments of facing rejection or feeling like, I would never get opportunities. Um when I went into career, I said, "Well, it was my emotions and my heart that got me to where I am right now," right? Just
mm,
because to some career, um, and professionalism does mean leaving your emotions at home, that's not what it's gonna mean to me because obviously that is what got me here, and if it weren't for my passion, if it weren't for me sometimes putting my heart in front of people, strangers, been in those places to begin with. So I always try to keep center on who I am because, right, just because I might be in a better position now, right? I know where those struggles led me to, and I'm thankful for them. And I will never ever feel as if, I wish they never happened because I know that that's where the strength comes from, and that's where I want to lead, and that is true to me.
I love it. I love how you word it. Because I think many of us listening, myself included, know that some of the best leaders are ones who have faced adversity and figured out a way to overcome that obstacle with their humanity intact, with their values intact. And that is no small
Yes.
thing for a leader. And you strike me as the kind of person who's done that yourself through your lived experience, but also bringing others alongside you, both with your family and first generation student and all of that and the work that you do. So, I mean, you mentioned that you faced rejection, jobs, colleges, immigration pathways, and yet you kept moving forward. And so when we talk about this whole experience, what internal mindset or maybe practical strategy helped you keep showing up with the confidence in who you are, especially when the stakes were so high?
Just like anything, the more practice you put into it, the more you're bound to be successful at it, right? So, I led with my heart, and I put those rejections aside, and I started branding myself as, okay, cannot seek these current opportunities and doing else, creating my own opportunities, creating my own projects, creating my own businesses, my own ideas. And what kept me going was the fact that it resonated. I would go up to recruiters knowing very well at the time that I could not rightfully take an opportunity from them, um, and would not necessarily deter me. I'd go up with the intention of just meeting someone in industry, getting to know them for who they are. And sure enough, that's all they wanted. That's all that in a career fair really you can take sometimes. And unfortunately, right, for students or anyone in a career fair looking for opportunities, that might be a little disheartening, but take it from someone who at the time couldn't take those opportunities. Is that was all I was given, and that was everything to me. And the fact that the recruiters or professionals I was starting to meet were receptive to that kept me going, as in, okay, I'm putting my story out there. I'm obviously, not oversharing in any way, trying to get to know them and sharing a little bit about me as well and being honest. I have my own challenges and my own struggles, but I made it very clear that's not going to stop me, and I'm not going to just stand and wait for a solution to come my way. And that, I think, is a universal thing across the board, even with non-immigrants, right? Are you going to be just stepped on and, kind of stay on the ground? Or are you gonna, decide, no, I'm gonna find a way around, right? Whether it be immigration status, whether it be, your own personal hardships, right? And that resonates with people, and you'd be surprised how many people will open up and be more than happy to just get to know each other when we establish that simple line of understanding.
I do like just continually when I hear you speak, I think of courage and I think of coraje and I think of the heart you're bringing. And I think, Brene Brown is one of my favorite authors. Many people love her speaking and her writing. And she does write quite a bit about this. And then also her research on shame and vulnerability, that, the fear of exposing the thing you're ashamed of. And I think especially right now in this current United States of America in 2026 and all the geopolitical things that are happening here, and there's a lot of fear. There's even some very intentional power by fear happening. And I think that courage, once again, is pushing through while you still have that fear to the thing that is right for you, according to your values. And I hear that so much in your story, and it's very inspiring. And I agree that some of that grit and resilience that you were tasked with, right or wrong, that it is formed. You have taken that opportunity to really focus on your locus of control. Here's what I can control, and then here's what I can't. And maybe one day your locus of control will expand. Like once your, immigration status changed, that gave you opportunities to, have access to maybe your locus of control expanding, but really being very focused on here's what I can control. And you really took that seriously and you move forward with it. And I think that is true leadership and incredibly inspiring. You've also alluded to the businesses that you started. And I think that's one of the things that impressed me most about you when I was first getting to know you through our Women XAI, when we all were going through the certification course in San Jose, and you did your presentation and you talked about one of the businesses that you started when you were really young. And so I would love to hear a little more about that particular part. So from cleaning services to, I guess, sustainable fashion plus AI, you have Apparel Assist, is that right?
Yeah.
Tell us more about that. And I guess what problem did you see in everyday life that inspired this startup for you? And how do you see AI playing a role in reducing fashion waste while empowering consumers?
Okay. Yeah. So my passion project, if I will. And as you can tell, right, I lead with my heart. So this is my passion project. This is everything to me. So yeah, I started off as probably many immigrants can relate, right, with humble janitor jobs, housemaid jobs. But the good thing I would say for me early on is I didn't fully grasp the concept of capitalism, but I was aware that at least here in the United States, you can make money yourself and you can formulate that legally into a self-serving business, right? The resources are vast on this. So it took a little bit of Google searching, but really it was that level of like accessibility. And I'm going to tie this back to like first generation students as well. Imagine if like the level of resources of entrepreneurship that are out there for first generation students navigating college. It's that level of like, if you measure how much resources there are for certain things, you can really see the difference and the lack of in other areas. But going back to resources and entrepreneurship, right? What age 16, I literally printed out business cards. Etsy has all these business card templates, printed some locally at my Walgreens for like, I don't know, 10 cents each card, figured out, how to maneuver the coupon on the Walgreens website as well to like even more so, right? Money tight at that point. Just getting every little cent out of our savings, and went to college at the time. I was 16, so I just literally walked to college, putting business cards on every residential home that was on my way to school that morning. Got my first customer. Googled how to start a sole proprietorship, started it under my mom, since obviously I wasn't even of age at the time. And I quickly had one call and then another, and started going further down the rabbit hole of Google search. How to start a Yelp campaign, how to administer, bookkeeping, how to keep everything on file. And eventually, my mom was obviously the 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 real, I would say, owner in terms of working and completing and getting all of this done. But I built this, and I built it for her. But I tapped into my actual career. At the time, I graduated with electrical engineering, but computer science was also in my workload for school. I said, perfect. This is the opportunity. This is the bridge I'm gonna create for myself. And I did. I created the website during COVID. I wrote it from scratch with JavaScript, HTML, YouTube videos, and spent the 3 months or so we were locked down, just waking up and watching video after video, typing away. Not a great website, but one that I published myself. Later, I actually interviewed for a position at Apple in their website development team. And they saw that website, and I was very embarrassed at the time. They were actually like considering me for that position. That was crazy. But again, yeah, I built a business, tried to bridge my career in some way or another, but then obviously got the entrepreneur a little niche in me, and realized that this right here, in person communication, was just something I was pretty good at. Whether it be tapping into being relatable, or whether it be just trying to make a customer, I really got an interest in not specifically home service, but, customer interfacing. So I went on and pursued my electrical engineering full time, became hardware engineer full time, and left my mom with the house cleaning business that I had built. But now I live in Silicon Valley, and Silicon Valley is one of the most expensive places to live. So now it's no longer this need of entrepreneurship for survival, which that was at the time, right? It's this actual desire to become an entrepreneur for the project and the real meaning behind it. So sustainable fashion has been something on my forefront mind for a while now, right? Like we're turning the world into a somewhat inhabitable place because of all the clothing waste that we unfortunately are consuming. And so I, as many others will resonate, right? I personally love clothing because of understanding that, it's not just a piece of fabric. It makes you feel good. It's what you need sometimes, comfort. It can be so much that we sometimes take for granted. That tied in with, the the global problem of generating this waste that then goes to other countries. Really, it's really sad because I think us alike clothing can tell a story, and that $50 sweater that ends up in a landfill was probably someone's pride and joy at one point or another. So tapping into that, right? Here I go again, trying to bridge the two, right? My career in tech and my passion for reducing this clothing waste. So I have obviously great network, great group of friends who started Apparel Assist. So that is our startup company. And obviously we want to develop an AI platform, a mobile app, if you will, to create a database for what we already have in our closets. So we probably have, most of us, a good big closet with stuff that we wear daily, stuff that we don't. And I think it really doesn't matter quantity. It matters more so what we and try to pursue as much. So, for example, clothing wise, right? There's many people who will probably pull out something in the back of their closet that they didn't even remember they had, right? And so I think to tackle this big problem of clothing waste in the first place, we got to look first in our homes. And I think we got to look first within us and our mentality of, consumerism. Don't get me wrong, I will go shopping probably within the next month as well, but what can we do? And it's literally just that. It's just being more conscious of what we have, what we currently own, and creating a tool to remind us of that, generate ideas, and just get the conversation started about this conscious buying, if you will, but also a sustainable fashion, keeping and preserving what we already have.
I love that. And it feels very consistent with who you are and what you're building, where you've come from, where you're going. And, just thank you for bringing your skill set, your grit, your resilience, your story, your heart, your courage to technology in a way that helps it be sustainable and human-centered for ourselves and for this planet we all love and live on. And also just acknowledging, clothing can have a story of its own. I think that's really beautiful. It's everybody probably has an example of like a hoodie that feels good on a hard day, or maybe when you were a kid, a favorite shirt you loved to wear that your mom was like, why do you keep wearing that shirt? Or whatever. Clothing can have its own story, right? Or something you wore when you were on a trip, or you know what I mean? Like that's true. So I think acknowledging the emotional attachments is important. And sometimes people who try to lead with a technology, in a climate impact, not acknowledging some of the emotions behind it can be where people miss a blind spot. But you seem to really be embracing that. I think you're such a fascinating person. Your story is just absolutely intriguing and remarkable. Who you are is so inspiring and values-centered and authentic. And thank you for showing up just with yourself and your story so vulnerably today. It's really touched me on a deep level. And I will have you go to our Difference Makers in a bit with our Patreon community there and ask you a little bit more about the impact of where you're going and stuff like that. But thank you so much for being here with us today. If people want to reach out to you and find more about your businesses or you as a person, how can people find you and what you're doing?
Yes, please follow us on Instagram. We're very active. We're developing again our platform currently, but right now we just want to share the story with everyone and again hear your own takes. Right? What is it that you think help in this unfortunate consumer filled world right now, and what we can do to help you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on and keep making a difference. I hope to have you back on the show in some amount of time to kind of get an update on how things are going.
For sure.
Thank you for being with us today, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Okay, difference makers. I know you, and I know when you hear something you really enjoyed and you learned from it, you want to share it. I am like that too, which is why I love to promote guests on this podcast for you to get to hear them yourself. Sometimes they write books, sometimes they write on Substack, sometimes they podcast, sometimes their voice is just every day in the workplace where they live and impact their communities in a variety of ways with all the hats that they wear. So if you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you did, please share it with a friend, a parent, a neighbor, somebody you went to boarding school with back in the day, somebody at work, your boss, people on your team, because this is a message they needed to hear. And it have impacted you. Please give us a 5-star rating and give us a review. It really helps our reach for more people like you to find us, the difference makers, the listeners, the leaders, the people in your communities that are making the world a better place. I appreciate you so much. Are you on Substack? Because I am, and I'd love to connect with you there. I process things there over Saturdays and Sundays, days off, sometimes weeknights as I'm researching and reading other articles. And it inspires me to write things where I'm going deeper into the behind the scenes of what some of the episodes on A World of Difference are all about. I'd love to connect with you there. So if you are on Substack, find me. You can go to loriadamsbrown.substack.com as a free, or I would prefer a paid subscriber, because then you get access to more of the in-depth things that are exclusively for my paid subscribers. I keep my prices as low as they can be on Substack, as low as they allow. But I do believe in being paid for my work, and I believe you should be paid for yours too. So join me there and let's make a difference together.